Hello there and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something really different. No music or instrument involved, but there's going to be photography. So I had an idea a few weeks ago on writing down a sort of method, a book, in which I talk about how being a photographer for almost 20 years shaped the way I create music. Doing that, I actually reread the most influential book that has been written in photography, and one is really dear for me. I read it in 2003 back in photography school, and it's called La Camera Chiara in Italian, La Chambre Claire in French, because the author is a French philosopher and thinker, Roland Barthes. This book, that I think is La Camera Lucida in English, is tentative of writing about photography. What is the meaning of photography? What really is photography, and how we differentiate before other arts? Photography is something that came really recently to fruition, like in the 1800s, and so it's still a new art form. And Roland Barthes tried with this book to give some rules, let's say. In the first part, it's two parts. In the first part, he tried to define what is photography and how it works. And the second part, starting from one photography that he really loves, that is a photo of his mother when she was a kid, he will try to reach to the final meaning of photography. And spoiler alert, the final point of this book in which you ask what is photography, the answer for Roland Barthes is like, photography means something that has been. So it seems super simple, right? Because everybody can say, yes, of course, a photography is something that has been cut, a moment that has been cut on your camera, so something that has been. But behind this simple significance, there's a world. And in this book, he talks very beautifully about that. It's super simple at a surface level, but also very deep. And even if you're not interested in photography, it tells you a lot of interesting things. So I really recommend it. So that said, the point here is how I find out that this really influenced my vision on music. So I take out 7 main points, and we will go through that. This video might be a little long, and it's hopefully something that you might find interesting. It's a new I'm trying to go outside a little the just demoing stuff, because I think it's important sometimes to share thoughts on what we like and how we do things, why we do things. So before going and checking all the points, few ways as usual you can support this page. If you find this interesting, you can subscribe and share this content. You can buy from the affiliate link down below. There's nothing really to buy today, but whatever you buy using the link, I'll get a tiny percentage, and that will help me keep me going. And then there's the Patreon way. You can become a Patreon. In Patreon, I share a lot of exclusive content and also do one-on-one session if you're interested into that. So let's now start talking about the main points and takeaway I found in this book. So number 1. So one of the main points of this book is the idea of a studium and punctum. So what is studium? Studium is the field of cultural interest. It's what makes you think, I like this thing, or I don't like this thing. It's really linked to your background, where you grow up, the culture, your society, your ethics and moral, and political values also. So it's something that comes from you, and you expand it, you put it onto the object you're watching. For example, if you watch a photo, you can say this photo is good or is not good. And that mainly comes from what is your culture extraction, from what you learned before, from where you live, so on and on. So basically, Studium is that things that make you say, I like this, but not love this. Barthes do a lot of example with photos that he can say, and coming from what he knows already, from his culture, so his background, he can say, this is a good photo. But what is punctum? Punctum is really the main idea of the book. Punctum, that means, in Latin, could be a point or could be also a puncture, so a wound. It's something that comes out of the art of, in this case, the photography, and hit us. So it's something that he will try to define, but it's really hard to define because it's something very personal and change. Each one of us has a different way to interpret something and see something. So in some picture, for him, it could be a simple detail that hits him for reason that we will see later. And in that case, it's the way he can say, I love this picture. So this is a very interesting concept because you can now check a lot of photography art and try to define what is the studium of that, what is the punctum of that. So you can see a photo or even art and looking at it and say, I like this one, but I don't love it. And try to say why I like it. Maybe because the culture I grow up makes me feel that this is a good as value. And sometimes you can find a picture that it hits you somehow, it punctures you, it wounds you. And in that case, you can try to define what is the punctum of that. So I find that interesting in music too, because there's a lot of music you can listen, and we can talk about pop music, whatever music you like. And a lot of time I feel we are not forced, but we say this is good music. But at the same time know that we don't really love that music. So one example that it's a little risky, but for me, Pink Floyd, I like them. I know that they are an important and super valuable band, and they do great music, but they never really punctured me. I never really loved any of their tracks. So yes, I enjoy listening to them. I sometimes put their album and listen to them, but I've never been punctured by them. So what is the puncture? What can be a puncture? For example, sometimes I listen to a song and it hit me somehow. The first time I listened to Brian Eno and John Cale, Spinning Away, for example, that's a song that punctured me. And why? Because I feel it bring me to a night that I spent with my grandfather before he died when I was a kid. Now, this song doesn't really talk about anything related to that, but somehow every time I listen to that song, and when he said the violet sky, I go there, hands in hands with my grandfather when I was a kid, walking in a field. So somehow I think that was the punctum. In that case, it was lying in the lyrics of a beautiful song. The song was beautiful, yes, but to puncture me, it had to add another layer. And that layer was the lyrics that somehow resonate with me, hit me, and brought me somewhere else. So this is interesting to me because I started reread all the bands and music that I listen and try to understand, do I like them or do I love them? And most of the time when I love something is because there's one detail that is very personal that hit me in a certain way. And most of the time we don't think about that. We just, say, I love this song. But it's very interesting to stop a second and trying to figure it out, what is the reason behind that. And I did that with a lot of songs, and I invite you to do the same. And you can do that with art too. And so this is the main point that Roland started with, and then from this one, we will see all the other. Okay, let's go now to the point number 2. So we got what Studium is. Somehow Studium is getting in line with the creator intention. This is a very important point. So while I am creating something, my idea is to get the like of my audience and try to put them in the same line of my intention. Roland Barthes, now calling Roland like a friend, found 5 ways, 5 what he calls surprises, in which an artist or a creator, he calls a creator operator, that would be the Latin word for that. 5 surprises, 5 ways in which he tries to cut your attention. I find those 5 ways very interesting because this is another way I can analyze what other artists or creator, even YouTube creator, for example, do to cut interest. This, again, stays in the field of Studium, not Punctum, but I find it very interesting because it gives you some frame to work with. So, what are these 5 different surprises? I'm gonna read because I don't wanna forget any of them. But, forgive me, but I'm not a TED talker, so I need some help. So number 1 is rarity. In photography, rarity would be the fact that the creator would go somewhere very hard to get, or photograph something that is very hard to find or photograph. For example, somebody that go in a war and is a war reporter, or somebody that get access to a very private home and he take picture there. So this is a way to cut your attention and your interest because it's something you have never seen before. In music, that seems to me something like I am gonna play some kind of instrument that you never have seen or you never have touched. So there's a lot of musician like that or creator like that. One comes to my mind now, hopefully a person that I've become friend with because I met him, Heimbach. He played with very rare and obscure instrument, and his entire poetic, his entire theme in music and video creation is linked to that. So automatically that is very interesting because I will never have a chance to play with those super amazing, weird, rare stuff. So this is one main thing. You can find what is your sphere of interest and rarity, how you can bring this to your in your creation. The second surprise is contingency. Contingency in photography means to be there at the right time. So if you know the photography of Cartier-Bresson, he's famous for his photos that cut the precise moment, and he was there at the right time. This is not just lucky strike, but it's like being there, doing things, always be ready. In music, this could be like being at a concert, being doing an improvisation, creating something that has its reason of being in a precise time and a precise space. So, for example, this really hit me because I do a lot of improvisation and the music I want to do is just improvisation. So if you are interested in that, you have to listen to me in that precise moment, and what comes out in that precise moment is unique. Okay, surprise number 3 is prowess or ability. So it's fun because Roland Barthes finds this the least interesting of them all, and me too. So I wonder if he actually influenced me when I was a young guy. So prowess is, for example, he bring the example of this photographer Edgerton that took for 50 years the image of a drop. So he studied so well that phenomena, that things, and he keep taking picture of the same thing over and over. So basically he become extremely skilled in doing that. There is some example of this that I can see in musicians, for example, that use the same instrument over and over and over until they become extremely proficient with that. And I have to say that two examples are something that I really love. And one is Elian Radic, for example, that he used for 20 years, 30 years, I don't know, for his entire life, the ARP 2500. Listen to her trilogy of La Morte, is amazing. Or somebody like Suzanne Chani that always uses Buchla system. So they got so skillful in something that become a reason for you to get interested in what they do. So then there's the fourth surprise, that is technique. Technique, it's my least favorite. Technique is like when you are so virtuoso or skillful that you kind of show off. And say when you are in photography, you use some kind of technique. Could be like superimposition, post-production. Back in the day of this book, there wasn't a lot of post-production, but now it's part of this thing. And to me, it's when you use in music a lot of tricks or post-production or stuff that I overproduce sound. I really like very simple things, so technique or virtuosity is where I am not really interested in. I guess I just get away from the artist, if that happens. And then the last one is the lucky find. The lucky find means like have some idea, a new idea, original idea. And in photography, I don't know what could be a good app, but I know about music. For example, I see a lot of DJ sets on YouTube that are shot, for example, on an helicopter or on a top of the tower. So it's not really something that is related to music itself, but it's an idea to make something more interesting. At least that is how I interpret that in music. And even in this case, it's one of the surprises that really doesn't interest me. So, taking away from these 5 techniques could be interesting if you want to create something. Try to analyze what you're doing, how you are doing, and what are your strengths. If you use something rare, so people would be interested about that, or you're so skillful at something. Again, this is linked to the studium part. It's something that probably will make people like you, but maybe not love you, because there's no the punctum yet, all right? But let's move to the new point. That should be point 3. Okay, point 3 is very interesting. It's Roland Barthes' intuition about landscape photography. And then I can reconnect that to ambient music. So Roland Barthes say that he is interested in a landscape photography when he can inhabit the place he's seeing. He's not interested because he can buy a house in that place, or he's not interested because he can just visit the place as a tourist. He loves a photo, a landscape, when he says in his mind, I want to live there. And he thinks that there's 2 reasons he wants to live there. One reason would be because that image brings him in some utopic future. Like, I would love to live here because it's gonna be beautiful, it's the dream place I wanna be. Or because it takes him back to a previous existence he had. So it can lead you to a memory when you were a kid, or something you visit before with your parents when you were a kid, who knows. But it can take you ahead of your time or back. I find this really strikingly similar to my fruition of ambient music. So, to me, ambient music bring me, when it works, bring you somewhere. So, when I hear a soundscape, somehow that translates in my head as an emotional landscape. So, and that's for two reasons, similar to Roland Barthes one. One, it's because mostly could be like a sci-fi, a futuristic kind of things, even dark. Sometimes I like to go in dark places. So I like when ambient music can have that dark touch. Take, for example, Biosphere. Biosphere is one of my favorite artists. If you listen to Substrata, A Man with a Camera, amazing, amazing album, that brings me somewhere else. And some moment can be dark, some moment can be futuristic. And I love that album because it literally transports me somewhere else. And then there's some other reason I like ambient music, and it's when a kind of sound, a kind of melody bring me back to my childhood or something that I experienced again. So it can be any different small detail. It could be just one sound that drive me back, right? So this is, again, it's something related to the punctum. It's just like, it could be a great sound, a great song, but then there's just that tiny detail that actually bring me back somewhere else. So in this case, the takeaway point is like, very interesting to think about ambient music as a way to take you somewhere else. And in this case, try to figure out where do you want to be taken in the future, utopic future. I mean, I want to be there in my future. There's something that makes me feel good thinking I'll be there. Or I want to go in the past. And that makes me analyze a lot of music that I listening and try to understand, okay, this bring me back, this bring me in the future. So I found it very, very compelling now to analyze music, ambient music in this way. Okay, now we're going to move to bullet point number 4. So as we move forward to the point, we will gonna get more into this punctum details. It's a punctum meaning. So one interesting point to think about it, it's like punctum as a character of immediacy in photography. You watch at a photo and the punctum hits you, come from the photo to you in a split second. And at the beginning you don't even know what it is. Maybe you arrive to that later on. But its character of immediacy is there. It's important. So I thought this is really when photography and music diverge. Photography, you can consume it in a split second, in a second. Music, you need to give time, listen to it. So could punctum exist in music? Could punctum arrive in a fruition that takes several minutes, if not hours? I think so, because I try to find, is there a song that right away, very fast, hit me, and then I realized after a while what was the reason. And yes, I have one song, for example, and it's called Forgotten Eyes by Big Thief. It's another of my favorite song. Right at the beginning of that song, there is a guitar playing. It's a very nice few bars of very hopeful, great introduction that leads the song into then the singing part. That 2 notes of guitar that sometimes happen hooked me right away. They hit me somehow. And I still don't know really why. But that beginning, that come at the end of the track again, so it opens and closes, somehow was my punctum. I did not need any time or thought to say, I love this track. And we will see later on that sometimes punctum takes time, but takes time to be understood. What Barthes says, sometimes the punctum arrives right away, hits you, and then it stays there. How you interpret that or give it a meaning, that will take time, and we will see later on. So In this point, the takeaway is just like sometime you listen to something and right away you are hooked. So maybe that's the punctum happening for you. And then it's interesting to sit down and say, why? What is the reason? Maybe in Forgotten Highs, that guitar sound bring me back of when I started playing guitar. It really reminds me of the sound of my first acoustic guitar. And I used to play very simple chords like that track. So somehow that's how that word collided with mine and hooked me up. All right, let's move now to point number 5. Okay, let's now go a little more deeper on the idea of punctum. Barthes says that is a very personal experience. What puncture me is not what puncture you. So it can be a rude thing, he says. For example, he show on this book some picture, and his punctum sometimes it is rude, like he likes one detail could be the big teeth of a kid, or how another kid in another photo is very dirty. So it doesn't have to be a beautiful detail. It's something that it's you and only you. So how can you create a punctum if that is so much of a personal experience? And this is the key point. You cannot. He says that if an artist tries to create or force you to see a punctum or to be punctual about something, then it's when the artist fails. For example, he shows another picture, and this in this case is a picture from a mental facility where there's 2 kids with some deformity. And in that case, the idea of the photographer was like, I'm gonna put in front of the camera these 2 poor deformed kids and you will be hit in your face. That's gonna be my punctum. And of course, he said that didn't work because punctum, you cannot put it there. You will just be there at the right moment and cut it in your photography. But there's no way that you can create or force it. So the idea of Barthes is like to puncture, you need to do something without the idea of puncturing somebody. It sounds like a conundrum here, like, so what can we do? It seems almost that the punctum, it's something that the artist cannot harness. And I think it's what probably makes some artists successful. It's people that most honestly write music or whatever without the real intention of like, I'm gonna puncture him. And being honest is the only way, and being honest and doing their work and creating is the only way they finally might puncture somebody. But the interesting thing is like, everybody will get punctured for different reason. And that is really striking because we can talk like, I like this movie, I like this track, and then I love this music, I love this movie. And most of the time we can fight with other people because it's hard that we perceive the things in the same way. And this somehow explains how taste, it's really a very personal matter. And also it's very interesting because you can create and you will never know why your heart hit somebody and not somebody else. And then you will be surprised that maybe your heart hit somebody for the reason you wouldn't have never thought. So this is another, again, getting deeper into this punctum thing. And yeah, the takeaway is like, you cannot really create art with the idea, I'm gonna puncture somebody. That will happen no matter what, if there is something there. it's something magic, I don't know, but I guess, again, it's the role of the artist or the creator, of the operator, to be there, to do his work, and then the punctum will be there. Sort of a mystery, right? Anyway, let's move now to point number 6. Okay, we're getting almost at the end of our analysis. In point 6, we are talking again about punctum. So Barthes says that when we experience art, we should get rid of the studium. So we should get sort of naked of our political, cultural ideas. Whatever its studium is a code, is something that has been coded for us to be liked somehow. So if we can code something, if we fully understand something, that cannot be a puncture, that cannot be punctum. And that's because whatever we can code, it's because we have a progressed culture, so we can analyze, we can code, we can understand. What Barthes says is like the good photos, not the good photos, the photos that he loves, not likes, he loves, are the photos that he cannot fully explain, code, or understand. So this maybe explain why sometimes we listen at commercial pop song and we like them right away. It's easy, it's comforting, and we can listen to them, but after a few times we listen to the same track, we will become bored and we want to move into something else. So maybe this is how fashion works. It's just like, riding a wave, you like it and then done. Move to the next one. But things we love sometimes takes time. So sometimes you listen to an album, to a track, and at the first listen, you are not really hooked. That goes a little in contrast with what I said before about Big Thief, Forgotten Eyes. But then, later on, you come to understand the same album on track. So, this is another way punctum can happen. Not right away in your face, but it can be something subtle, that it's there and makes you start ruminating on it, and then later on you realize, I love this track, because punctum was always there. Barthes thinks that whenever there's a punctum in art, in a photography, it was there since the beginning. It's not anything that you will put there. Because again, punctum is something that comes from the art and hits you. So, what is there? Let me see if I forgot anything in this main point here. It says that when there's punctum, somehow the punctum destroys the frame of the photography and makes you think of what is beyond that. So it's like, I don't know how, an off focus, something that is a word that is around that photography, and that can happen in music too. The great music, again, takes you somewhere, and a good track doesn't end with just the track. It has a word around. So a good punctum is a way to transcend the art itself and makes you think of something bigger. And this leads to the final point. So there is a quote of Kafka, and he says that we photograph things in order to drive them out of our mind. It's an interesting concept. Basically, you take a picture of something because you don't want to have it in your mind. That can sound like a contradiction, right? You photograph something because you always want to have it with you. But somehow Barthes, starting from that idea, go to the point where he thinks that a great picture is best when you can think of it with your eyes closed. So you see something, then you close your eyes, and that picture will relive in your brain. And you talk about is a musical question. So that was when somehow the circle closed in itself. It's like somehow you need the silence to make that photo come again in your brain. And somehow it's with music too. A good track need the silence of your mind, some space in your mind to come back to you and to live inside your brain. So it's still one of those things that you read and you don't fully understand, but it sounds so good to me. And I like to think that beautiful track that puncture me live somehow in the silence of my mind. When my mind is silenced, they will have their space there to come back. So as much as Barthes says, you have to close your eyes to really see a photograph, maybe you need the silence to really come to appreciate a track or music. Which again, it's a beautiful paradox, right? But it sounds so good. Okay, so this was the point, the 7 ideas that to me were really striking. There's so much more, and I hope you will buy this little book and read it. You can literally read it in a day, and then you can reread and reread and reread because it's super beautiful. And we didn't talk about the second part because it's very personal, very beautiful, and super touching. There's a lot of thoughts about death and photography, because when you see a photography, a lot of time you see death, people that died, or it's that moment that, you know, it's a sort of celebration of death. And it's a very interesting, scary and touching point. So, like with music, sometimes we listen to music that has been recorded, it will never be again. It has been, but it will never be again. Maybe whoever wrote it died. So there is the concept of death inside it, which is a little morbid but beautiful, and like, yeah, maybe for another video. Please, if you have time, take this book, give it a read, and you'll enjoy it. Now, to close, I have few points that I write down here, and like the takeaway as a musician. So we discussed already about that, but I guess to put them again, 5 points, and this is how I use the idea of this book in my daily musical adventure. So number 1, do not create to impress. So this is something that I struggle my entire life. I want to create music and I want people to like it, right? And we discussed that people need to love your things, right? So it's kind of not pointless, but I find out that I don't want anymore to impress. I want to be honest. So I want to create with the idea not to impress. I don't want to put a punctum, a puncture in my thing. I just want to do my thing. I want to be honest with that. And maybe it will be loved. And this then goes on number 2. What works for me might not work for you. It's basic, we know that, but it's very important because sometimes I release a track and I think this is beautiful, and then nobody likes it. I mean, nobody. It doesn't have the resonance that I would like to have. And in the opposite, I have something that I released that I thought it was so simple, so basic that nobody would have loved, and instead a lot of people loved it. So if you surrender to that, surrender to the idea that you will never know how your art will be embraced, your life probably will be easier and better. So, point 3, the punctum, the puncture you create with your art, it can't be harnessed, right? So you will never know the reason why somebody loves your art. Again, it's another exercise in surrendering. People can love your song for the reason you want it, because it's a beautiful track. People can love your track because there's just one particular sound, or even because you use a particular instrument. So don't hold too much on that reason. People will love or like what you do for different reasons. Get over with that. Number 4, abandon cultural expectation. So we said you need to be naked. You need to give up on your studium to appreciate the punctum. So we are all following a set of rules, and we know how sound is good, or how we should write to have a good track or whatever. Maybe the best way would be to just forget all these rules. And we hear this so many times, but after reading this book makes a lot more sense. If you completely remove all the cultural expectation, maybe what is left, it's you, and maybe that could be the essence of the punctum, is how you can convey some kind of punctum to audience. And the last point, success comes when you are not looking for it. So there's one point when he said you cannot, again, harness the punctum, and the artist cannot really create any punctum. And that made me think that successful people do their things and success will come, because they are there, they're doing something honestly. And this comes for me like the idea of improvisation is still my main thing. Improvise, be honest, put out yourself, and maybe punctum will be there one day. And you will be managing to get it, put it in, and be successful with that. That doesn't mean you'll be successful in life. You'll be successful with one track, with one thing you do. So somehow these 5 points put together give a lot of relief on what you're doing. You can chill, right? It's just like there's not really too much that you can do to make your track from being good to being amazing and loved, because that is something that will be there. It's some characteristic that will be there for some reason that is still pretty unclear, but it's beautiful like that. All right. Be honest, this has been the most hard video I ever shot. There's something in me saying, why you even doing this? Because you are not that smart, you are not that, you're not a thinker, and this is, the imposter syndrome and all this kind of stuff that happen in my brain. But I love this concept of music and photography together because it's my life, and I would love this to sparkle some discussion down there. I'm sure there's people in you that likes these ideas, and I hope this kind of video are well received so I can do more. And yeah, again, it was hard but fun and interesting, and this is my honest 2 cents. Please take it for what they are, and I hope though they can sparkle some creativity and some other idea. Well, thanks for watching. Next week we go back with some other demo and stuff. And yeah, thanks. Have a good week. Ciao.